Thank you for watching this webinar on eliminating bullying for students with disabilities. I'm Stephanie Klitsch, the Assistant Director of the Education Law Program at Council for Children's Rights. Just to note that the information I'm providing today is for educational purposes and is not legal advice. Before I jump into the content for this webinar, I wanted to share a little information about the Education Law Program. The Education Law Program has four main focuses. First, through our Education Advocacy for Individual Family Service, we provide individual representation for students and their legal guardians in need of legal assistance regarding special education, Section 504 plans, and school discipline. Families interested in legal representation can contact our Get Help email address or call 704-943-9609 for assistance. Second, through our Education Navigation Service, we work with students involved in the juvenile court system in Mecklenburg County. The service addresses issues related to students' education rights by identifying current education issues and providing detailed recommendations for how to resolve those concerns. Referrals can be made through our ELP email address or by calling 704-943-9611. Third, we focus on systemic education issues. We cannot individually serve all students in our community who may need our services. Instead, we strategically elevate issues that can have a broader impact on students in the community. Lastly, we provide free community trainings on topics related to education advocacy. In addition to our First Wednesday series, we provide training to parent groups and community groups by request. Here's the agenda for today. I will go over some preliminary information and then focus on our main topic, eliminating bullying for students with disabilities. First, I'll go over two quick notes. Then I'll give an overview of the different types of education interventions. Then I'll provide a general overview of bullying. And lastly, I will discuss eliminating bullying for students with disabilities. Before I get started, I want to go over a few terms that I will use throughout the webinar. There are many acronyms when we discuss special education and some different terms that actually mean the same thing. I want you to understand that students who receive special education have an individualized education program, an IEP. They are also called exceptional children, EC. EC is a North Carolina specific term. Ultimately, when we're talking about EC services, IEP services, or special education, we're talking about the same services, and we can use those terms interchangeably. Charter schools. Some families choose to send their students to charter schools instead of a typical public school district. Charter schools are public schools authorized by the State Board of Education and operated by independent nonprofit boards of directors. Everything that I will discuss in this webinar applies to charter schools as well as traditional public school districts. Charter schools must follow special education law, Section 504 law, and North Carolina law on school discipline. Too often, we learn of situations where charter schools are telling families that they do not need to comply with these laws. So we want to make it clear that students have the same rights in charter schools as they do in traditional public school districts. Next, I'm going to do a brief overview of the different types of education interventions. We like to begin trainings with these slides so that everyone is aware of what we mean when we talk about terms like IEP and Section 504 plan. This graphic helps us take a step back and understand what types of services are available to different groups of students. The largest circle here incorporates all students, whether or not they have a disability. Any student who is struggling academically or behaviorally in school can receive extra assistance. In North Carolina, this is through something called Multi-Tiered System of Support, MTSS. You do not need to have a disability in order to receive support through MTSS. In order to fall into either of the two smaller circles, a student must have a qualifying disability. The bigger of the two circles is Section 504. As we will learn, more students with disabilities fall under Section 504 than under special education. Special education is the smallest circle because it has the most stringent eligibility requirements. As I mentioned, MTSS is available to any student whether or not they have a disability. It is intended to provide extra support and interventions to students with additional needs. MTSS involves different tiers of support. All students are considered starting on Tier 1 and have access to high-quality instruction. At Tier 2, students with identified academic or behavioral needs receive some small group intervention. Tier 3 is the highest tier of MTSS. At this tier, students receive more intensive, individualized supports. A key component of MTSS is universal screening. This is intended to identify students who need supplemental support. By the time students get to Tier 3, they should be receiving evidence-based interventions to respond to their specific needs. Progress monitoring is a part of MTSS as well. This means that there are specific goals that the interventions are intended to address, and data is regularly collected to determine whether students are making progress toward those goals. Families need to be aware when their student is on a Tier 2 or Tier 3 plan and actively participate in the process. There are generally meetings to review the student's progress, and the family should attend and ask to get regular updates based on the progress monitoring. The MTSS team can make a referral to special education if they believe that the student may qualify for an IEP. This referral can happen concurrent with MTSS interventions and need not wait until those interventions have been exhausted. Let's talk briefly now about who qualifies for special education services, which was the smallest circle in that first graphic. For a student to receive special education services, the student must meet all of the following criteria: be between the ages of 3 and 21, meet the criteria for at least one of 14 disability eligibility categories. In North Carolina, each eligibility category has specific requirements that must be shown for the student to fall under that category. For instance, a diagnosis of autism by itself does not necessarily mean that a student will automatically be eligible under the autism eligibility category. Next, they must have a disability that adversely affects their educational performance and requires specially designed instruction. I want to point out that educational performance is broader than academic performance. A student can be advancing from grade to grade and have passing scores in their classes and still be eligible. Educational performance also includes things like their social interactions and behavioral needs. Here's a list of all 14 disability eligibility categories in North Carolina. IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. The P in IEP stands for program and not plan. And that is because an IEP incorporates all of the special education services that a student receives. The IEP document itself is long, generally at least 15 pages, and is very detailed. Included in the IEP document are the student's strengths, weaknesses, and needs, measurable goals for the student to achieve in the course of a year, the accommodations and modifications, related services, and specially designed instruction necessary to help the student reach their IEP goals, where the services will be provided. This does not mean the actual location, such as Myers Park High School versus West Charlotte High School. Instead, this refers to whether the student will receive the services with their non-disabled peers, or instead in a setting with only other students with disabilities. For many students, it ends up being a combination of those options. The IEP document is developed by an IEP team, which must include the special education decision maker. All special education students are entitled to something called a free appropriate public education, FAPE. FAPE is a legal standard that requires all students' IEPs to be sufficient for the student to achieve reasonable educational progress. We often receive questions about the difference between IEPs and Section 504 plans. As I have said, all students who receive special education services have an IEP. Students with IEPs receive some amount of specially designed instruction with a special education teacher. Specially designed instruction is adapting the content, methodology, or delivery of instruction to meet the unique needs of a student that results from the student's disability. Section 504 accommodation plans, however, are for students with disabilities whose needs do not rise to the level of requiring specially designed instruction from a special education teacher. These students receive all of their instruction in a general education environment. They receive accommodations and modifications that their general education teacher can implement to allow the student to have access to their education. Also, Section 504 has a broader definition of disability, so more students qualify under Section 504 than qualify for special education. This is why the Section 504 circle in the first graphic was bigger than the special education circle. If a student has an IEP, they do not require a Section 504 plan because everything that would be on the Section 504 plan would be incorporated into the IEP. Hopefully an example will help illustrate the difference between an IEP and a Section 504 plan. Sam meets eligibility criteria as a student with a specific learning disability. His IEP provides services with a special education teacher several times a week to address his individual goals in reading, writing, math, and organization. He also receives modified assignments, extended time on tests, and takes tests in a room with fewer students. On the other hand, Aaron has severe myopia, which is nearsightedness. Her Section 504 plan requires seating near the teacher and board and all printed materials presented in a larger font. As you can see, Aaron does not have any special education services or any individual goals like Sam has. Also, Sam receives accommodations and modifications that, if those were all he needed, could be on a Section 504 plan. Those accommodations and modifications are modified assignments, extended time on tests, and taking tests in a separate setting. Here are some important similarities between IEPs and Section 504 plans. They both generally have review meetings every year. IEPs are required to be reviewed annually, and while that requirement is not in the law for Section 504 plans, it is a common practice for them to be reviewed annually as well. These are very important meetings for families to attend. And while there's only one meeting required each year, families can request an IEP meeting or Section 504 meeting at any time during the school year. Lastly, IEP teams and Section 504 teams can spend hours and hours drafting a beautiful document. But if it's not actually implemented, then it's worthless. It is critical for families to follow up with the teachers to make sure that the services, accommodations, and modifications are actually being provided as written. Now let's transition to our topic for today, eliminating bullying for students with disabilities. I'm going to begin by reviewing some information first about what bullying is and relevant policies governing bullying. Bullying is unwanted, aggressive behavior among school-age students that involves power imbalance. The behavior is repeated or has the potential to be repeated over time. Bullying is sometimes called harassment. I'm going to use the term bullying throughout most of this webinar. The bullying is often related to a person's personal characteristics. I've listed some examples on the slide, including race, religion, gender identity, disability, and weight. There are three main types of bullying. Verbal bullying, which involves saying or writing mean things such as teasing, name calling, inappropriate sexual comments, taunting, and threatening to cause harm. The next category is social bullying, which involves deliberately hurting someone's reputation or relationships, such as telling other students not to be friends with someone, spreading rumors about someone, or embarrassing someone in public. And the last is physical bullying, which involves hurting a person's body or possessions, such as hitting, kicking, pinching, spitting, tripping, pushing, taking or breaking someone's things, or making mean or rude hand gestures. In the first two types of bullying, it may involve what's called cyberbullying. I'm going to discuss cyberbullying policies in a few minutes, but cyberbullying is bullying that takes place using electronic technology, such as cell phones, computers, or tablets. This can include things like mean text messages or emails, rumors on social media, and embarrassing pictures or videos posted online. Students who are bullied may experience negative physical, school, and mental health issues. They're more likely to experience depression, anxiety, increased feelings of sadness and loneliness, changes in sleep and eating patterns, health complaints, and a decrease in academic achievement and school participation. I've listed some warning signs that may indicate that a student is being bullied, such as unexplained injuries, frequent headaches or stomach aches, decrease in grades, and low self-esteem. North Carolina state law requires each school district and charter school to have a policy against bullying. The policy must include the following: consequences and remedial action for a person who bullies, procedures for reporting bullying, including a provision that allows the report to be anonymous, and procedures for prompt investigation of reports of bullying. Importantly, there is a broad reporting obligation when someone witnesses bullying. Any school employee, student, or volunteer who has witnessed bullying or has reliable information that a student or school employee has been subject to bullying should report it to an appropriate school official. Over the next few slides, I'm going to discuss policies related to bullying in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, CMS, since it is our local school district, to illustrate how the state law can be laid out in practice. Each school district and charter schools policies look a bit different, so it's important to find the policies that are relevant to your specific school. There are a couple items in CMS's bullying policies I wanted to point out. First, the policies clearly state that it is a violation for any school staff to tolerate any bullying. Again, school employees have an obligation to report bullying when they encounter it. Second, it's critical to understand that bullying that occurs outside of school hours and away from the school campus can still be disciplined. The policy states two situations when this might happen. One, if the bullying behavior includes threats of harm to person or property. Or two, the bullying results in a material and substantial disruption of the orderly conduct of school business or activities, or interferes with the learning environment or the rights of others at school. CMS policies specifically discuss cyberbullying. Given how much time students spend on their devices these days, this has become a major way that bullying occurs. In CMS's definition of cyberbullying, it includes posting slurs, rumors, or other disparaging remarks about a student, sending an email or instant message that contains verbal bullying, taking or sending obscene, embarrassing photos or videos, or posting misleading or fake photographs. Reporting bullying in writing is absolutely critical. Every time that a student experiences bullying, it needs to be reported in writing to create documentation of it occurring and to prompt an investigation. In CMS, there are two main ways to report bullying. Likely, the best way is to use the online bullying reporting system. Generally, there's a link to it on CMS's homepage. If not, it can definitely be found by going to the Bullying Prevention Department website. A benefit of this method is that there is an option to check the status of the report after it's submitted. Additionally, using this method ensures that the report is getting to the correct people in the district without any additional work on the reporter's part. The second option is to use the Intimidation, Bullying, and/or Threats Administrative Report Form. This can be found in the back of the Code of Student Conduct. The form states that it should be sent to the school principal and the learning community superintendent. If using this method, it is important to keep a copy of it for your own documentation. Every incident of bullying should be reported. If bullying has been ongoing and not yet reported, the family should make a report as soon as possible that includes detailed information of all of the incidents so far. I've included on the slide the contact information for CMS's Bullying Prevention Department. CMS's policies surrounding investigating reports of bullying are not very specific. They state that the principal or his designee shall promptly investigate claims or reports of bullying. It states that consequences for bullying are set forth in the Code of Student Conduct. Bullying factors into a couple different rule violations in the Code of Student Conduct, and potential consequences range from a level 1 response, which does not include out of school suspension, to the highest consequences of long-term suspension or expulsion. We regularly get calls from families whose students have experienced bullying and are at the point of feeling like the only real solution for their student is to change schools. CMS has a specific policy regarding requesting a school transfer or reassignment due to bullying, so I wanted to highlight that. In making a request for transfer or reassignment based on bullying, parents and legal guardians must provide all of the following. First, documentation that the bullying incidents have been reported to the principal or other appropriate staff of the school. Second, documentation confirming a face-to-face meeting between the family and the principal of the current school to discuss the bullying report. Third, a description of the interventions developed to prevent the bullying from recurring and details on how those interventions have been implemented. And lastly, documentation of occurrences of bullying after implementation of the interventions. CMS does not make this easy on families. Not only do families need to provide a significant amount of documentation, including documentation that may be hard to get, ultimately the student needs to have been bullied even after interventions are put in place in order for the request to transfer or be reassigned to be successful. I will now transition into information about bullying specifically for students with disabilities protected under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. This covers students with both IEPs and Section 504 plans. Students with disabilities are 2 to 3 times more likely to be bullied than their peers without disabilities. The negative effects of bullying are not unique to students with disabilities, but I highlight them here due to the increased prevalence of bullying for this group of students. They include effects such as higher rates of absenteeism and dropping out of school, decreased academic performance, inability to concentrate, and increased frequency or intensity of behavioral interruptions or outbursts. Students with disabilities have additional protections when it comes to bullying. These protections are in place even if the bullying the student endures is not related to the student's disability. These protections come from Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. They protect students with IEPs and Section 504 plans. The protections afforded by these laws are for situations when the bullying causes a student with a disability to be denied an equal opportunity to an education. The U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, OCR, has excellent guidance for schools to follow in this area. An OCR complaint is an avenue that families can pursue if the school system does not respond appropriately to a bullying situation for a student with a disability. When schools are evaluating a situation when a student with a disability has been bullied, they should conduct two analyses. First, they should determine whether the bullying was based on the student's disability. This is called disability-based harassment by OCR. So I'm going to use that term when discussing this inquiry. Second, the school should determine whether the bullying resulted in the denial of a free, appropriate public education, referred to as a FAPE. I'm going to review these analyses in turn. The first analysis is whether the bullying is based on the student's disability. When bullying is based on a student's disability, this is disability-based harassment. OCR states that when a school knows or should know about this kind of bullying, it must take immediate and appropriate action to investigate. When investigating the situation, the school should determine if the bullying caused something called a hostile environment. I've included OCR's definition of hostile environment, which is sufficiently serious to interfere with or limit a student's ability to participate in or benefit from the services, activities, or opportunities provided by the school. While the term hostile environment is some legal jargon, it is important for families to have a sense of the meaning behind this term. It means that not only is it important for families to provide information about the bullying actions itself, it is also important to report how the bullying is impacting the student. Does the student not feel comfortable participating in class? Is the student avoiding certain classes or extracurricular activities due to concerns about being bullied? Is the student avoiding the cafeteria or unable to enjoy other less structured times during the school day? If families have details about how the student is being impacted by the bullying, they should share them in writing. The school's investigation should also encompass looking at these types of impacts. If the school finds that the bullying has caused a hostile environment, it must take prompt and effective steps to do 4 very important things. 1, end the bullying. 2, eliminate the hostile environment. 3, prevent it from recurring. And 4, remedy its effects. I appreciate this clear guidance from OCR about schools' responsibilities in this situation. It's not enough that the bullying ends. Schools should not simply respond by punishing the student doing the bullying and think they have done enough. Instead, they must comprehensively address the situation so that the hostile environment is removed, remedy the effects of the bullying, and then also engage in prevention work so that the bullying does not occur again. I have said the schools are obligated to remedy the effects of bullying. It is powerful when families can suggest to the school what they would like to see in terms of remedies. I've included here some examples of remedies from OCR. These can be requested proactively from the family without going through the OCR complaint process. Compensatory education. This is educational services designed to put the student in the position the student would have been if not for the bullying. These often look like one-on-one educational services provided outside of typical school hours. Counseling for the victim, ongoing monitoring by the school to determine if bullying continues, a school-wide bullying prevention strategy, a voluntary school climate survey for parents and or students to assess the presence and effect of bullying, revising the district's anti-bullying policies to be more effective, training staff and parent volunteers on district policies and how to recognize and report bullying, and providing continuing education to students on the district's policies, including where to get help if a student witnesses or experiences bullying. This is not an exhaustive list, and remedies should be tailored to the individual student and situation. I've discussed what schools are obligated to do when determining if a situation is disability-based harassment. In this slide, we're looking at the elements that OCR looks at when they receive a complaint that a school did not appropriately address disability-based harassment. If a family files an OCR complaint claiming that a student has experienced disability-based harassment, OCR will investigate the following. First, was the student bullied based on a disability? Second, was the bullying sufficiently serious to create a hostile environment? Third, did school officials know about the bullying? If not, should they have known about the bullying? And fourth, did the school respond appropriately? I have talked throughout this webinar about the need for good documentation. If a student is being bullied based on their disability, it's important that families are collecting information about each of these elements. In addition to keeping copies of all reports of the bullying, families should consider keeping other documentation, such as any emails, letters, or messages sent between the family and school staff about the impact that the bullying is having on the student. Notes about any instances when bullying has happened at a time or in a place when school staff should have been aware of it. All communication received about the school's investigation and response to the bullying incidents. I'll move now to the second analysis the school should conduct for any students with disabilities experiencing bullying. This analysis is whether the bullying resulted in the denial of a FAPE. Students with IEPs and Section 504 plans are entitled to a FAPE, which stands for Free Appropriate Public Education. Section 504 states that a FAPE is the provision of services designed to meet the student's individual educational needs as adequately as the needs of non-disabled students. Under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that governs special education, a FAPE means special education and related services that allow the student to make reasonable educational progress. This second analysis looks at whether the bullying impacted the student's ability to receive a FAPE. An important thing to note in this analysis is that here it does not matter if the bullying was related to the student's disability. If a student with a disability was bullied for any reason and the bullying resulted in a denial of a FAPE, that denial must be remedied. Whenever a student is bullied, the student's IEP or Section 504 team should meet. The team should discuss whether the bullying has resulted in the student's needs changing, such that the current IEP or Section 504 plan no longer provides the student with a meaningful educational benefit. The team should discuss whether new or different services are necessary to address the student's changed needs. If so, those changes should be made promptly. It's critical that the student not bear the burden of avoiding or handling the bullying. This responsibility should not fall to them. Along those lines, the solution to the bullying should not be that the student who has experienced the bullying has to change classrooms or schools, unless the team agrees that that change is necessary for the student to receive a FAPE. In essence, this prevents the student who has been bullied from being punished by having to change their class or routines due to the bullying behavior from another student. If a student with an IEP or Section 504 plan is being bullied, families should request an IEP or Section 504 meeting. Here are some examples that may indicate that the student's needs have changed to the extent that their IEP or Section 504 plan needs to be updated. A sudden decline in grades, the onset of emotional outbursts or withdrawal, an increase in the frequency or intensity of behavioral challenges, or an increase in absences. Supports for a student included on their IEP or Section 504 plan are necessarily individualized, but I wanted to give some examples of the types of support that could be included. The team could identify a trusted adult in the school for the student. The student could rely on that individual to do things like report bullying, seek assistance or assurance, and help them feel safe. The team could create a plan for how the school will specifically document and report incidents of bullying for the student. The team could request trainings for school staff and even classroom peers to help them better understand a student's disability. This is something that would need to be done judiciously, but can be effectively done, especially for younger students. Student education about school district policies on bullying behavior. Student transitions during the day can be a prime time for bullying to occur. IEP and Section 504 teams should carefully consider how to create safe transitions for the student. The team can also discuss the need for compensatory education, a remedy I discussed a little earlier. Sometimes it is a student with a disability who is engaging in the bullying behavior. Families sometimes struggle to know how to address the situation when it is their student engaging in the bullying. If this is happening, the student's behavior should be addressed through their IEP or Section 504 plan. For example, behavioral and/or social skills goals can be included on an IEP. Counseling can be provided as a related service. The student can receive a functional behavioral assessment, an FBA, and a behavioral intervention plan, a BIP. Our school discipline training goes into these strategies in much more detail. To review, we want families of students being bullied to do the following. Report every instance of suspected bullying in writing and keep a copy for themselves. Follow up on the status of the investigation into the bullying and any corrective action being taken. It should gather and keep any documentation of the investigation and corrective action. Families should brainstorm and suggest potential remedies. Lastly, if a student has an IEP or Section 504 plan, families should request an IEP or Section 504 meeting to discuss the bullying and its impact on the student. I wanted to give a quick overview of how to file an OCR complaint, since that is one of the main ways that a family can allege that a school has mishandled resolving a situation of bullying for a student with a disability. Generally, an OCR complaint must be filed within 180 calendar days of the alleged discrimination. Here, the discrimination would be the school's inappropriate or inadequate response to the bullying for a student with a disability. 180 calendar days can go by quickly, so parents and legal guardians cannot wait too long if they want to take action on a concern. If you choose to address your concern through this district's grievance procedure, OCR will not consider the complaint until that process is concluded. In that circumstance, the OCR complaint must be filed within 60 calendar days of the conclusion of the district's grievance process. OCR is a discrimination complaint form that you can fill out on their website. Alternatively, you can write a letter with all the required components and send it in. I've included here the OCR website. This is an excellent resource. It includes an overview of Section 504, policy guidance on disability discrimination, frequently asked questions, and the complaint form. The regional office for OCR for Charlotte is in Washington, D.C. You can see their phone number and email address here on the slide. There are many great resources online about bullying, and I've included some of our favorites here. I hope the information provided today has been helpful. If you believe that you may need legal representation related to a Section 504, special education, or school discipline issue, you can contact our team at the gethelp@cfcrights.org or call us at 704-943-9609. For court-involved youth, members of the Child and Family Team or student's juvenile defense attorney can make a referral for our education navigation services by emailing elp@cfcrights.org or by calling 704-943-9611. For training requests, please contact us at elp@cfcrights.org or 704-372-7961. I've provided here some links to some helpful resources, including the NC Policies Governing Services for Children with Disabilities. Also, please be sure to review the handouts for this webinar. Please remember to complete your post-workshop survey. It should only take a couple minutes and will provide us with feedback that we can use to improve our webinars and presentations. Thank you again for watching.